Welcome. The current session focuses on the reasons of expansion of vocabulary today. I hope and expect by the end of this session, you would have an understanding of the reasons of the expansion of vocabulary during the times and how it has happened. Well, my dear students, the expansion of the vocabulary seems to be going on at a great rate in our times. Many new words have been added, a lot of changes have taken place, and all this is, this, what I would say, late modern English period. It has its influence of what actually happened in the modern English period, what happened in the 19th and the 20th century. Many new words actually continued during these 2 centuries to be a part of the English language. And if we trace the history back, in fact, we would see this was not a surprise, this was not something different. This had always been happening through the times, going back, to the age of, this intellectual reasoning of 18th century, back to Renaissance, back to Middle English period, and even to the very early periods of Old English. We would see that these additions of words from Greek and Latin languages had always been made. Some of those words get into the general vocabulary, some remain just for specialized uses. During the 19th and 20th century, if we look at the vocabulary, we would notice mainly, it was in the fields of science and, technology and medicine where, all this inclusion was made, where all these new words were brought. The question that we would focus on is, how does this vocabulary expand and what are the reasons? Well, answering the first part of the question, part of the question, that how did it happen, I would say new words were coined. It happened through coinage. Well, all the words were not coined. Some words, as I said earlier, were borrowed from other languages like Latin and Greek and French languages and Italian and German languages. Sometimes the words were directly borrowed and they were used. Sometimes the root from a Latin or a Greek word would be taken and a word would be built on that. A new word would be created. Sometimes there would already be a word in English language itself and it was just given a new shape and a form. Sometimes 2 words were brought together, and they would be blended like brunch, that would be made by combining some parts of breakfast and lunch. Sometimes word would be chopped off, some part of it would be cut off and the rest of the part would be used, that would give a kind of abbreviated forms or smaller forms. But how did all this, happen has a strong connection with why, after all this happened. What were the reasons of all this expansion of vocabulary? I would say there were almost, if we talk about them, as the main reasons, there would be maybe 6 to 8 main reasons that we can talk about. The most important generalized answer to this question would be changing times. 19th and 20th century, my dear students, are the times when the speed of change increased. The times were changing with such a speed that, to meet the demands that were emerging in the changing situations, the vocabulary that English already had was not enough. This was one of the major reasons new vocabulary was needed to fill in the gap that was created through, this, speedy progress of humanity. The second point, need of the times. Now, the English language did not have sufficient fund of words to rely on itself. Because these inventions, because these discoveries, because these scientific endeavors were taking place in different parts of the world, wherever they were taking part, there was a need to bring in elements from those cultures to give names to all those things. Inventions, all those inventions that we find in these times are far, far greater in number as compared to the previous human history. These inventions needed to be named. And to name them sometimes, then because this was a requirement, the names of the scientists who did those inventions or anything related to that would be used, as a source to create a name for that particular thing or item. Overall, science was one of the major reasons. Expansion brought through science, revolution brought through science was one of the major reasons of, this expansion of vocabulary. Another reason that I would like to talk about is traveling. Traveling, I would combine with media and communication. All these three forces, they were working together. They were creating a strong impact on the lifestyle, on the society. And what was the result? The result was that, people had new experiences in life. They had more possibilities of exploring. And of course, there were far, far more possibilities and opportunities for them to explore the world, to communicate with each other, and, to share and know through media. For all this, new items of language were required. So this was one of the important reasons why this vocabulary was, expanded during this period. Overall, I would say 19th and 20th century are the times of the worldwide spread of English. English had already started traveling to other parts of the world from the 19th century onwards. So, to accommodate the changes that were happening, that were taking place due to this worldwide spread, a fund of vocabulary was required that would fulfill the requirements and that would match up with the speed of the life that, was a new experience during the 19th and the 20th centuries.